Have you ever trusted someone so deeply that not for a second did you imagine they could betray you? That everything you built with so much effort could be destroyed in a single cruel blow? That's exactly what happened to me. In a matter of days, I went from living a comfortable life to being thrown out of my own home, with nothing but a suitcase in my hands and an unbearable emptiness in my chest. But if you think this is a story of defeat, you're wrong. Because sometimes, you have to lose everything to discover what truly matters. And it was in my darkest moment that I found a strength I never even knew I had. If you've ever felt like life turned its back on you, stay with me. Because this story will show you that life can turn around again, but this time, in your favor. Now, let's go back to the beginning. Because everything started with a single signature. That morning, the sun shone brightly, completely unaware that my life was about to fall apart. Golden light filtered through the worn curtains of the porch, dancing gently across the time-worn wooden floor. I sat there, on the old rocking chair, a cup of hot coffee warming my hands, feeling the steam fade slowly into the morning air. And I watched the garden I had nurtured over so many years. The blue hydrangeas smiled up at the sky. The scent of damp earth mixed with the sweet perfume of flowers, filling the air like a silent promise of peace. It was my little paradise, built through sleepless nights, invisible sacrifices, and silent battles won without applause. There, on that porch, I believed I was safe. I trusted in the solidity of the life I had built. I trusted in the people who were part of it. Especially him. My nephew, Daniel. The same Daniel I once cradled as a baby. The boy I taught to read, taught to ride a bike, and proudly cheered on at school recitals. When he came to me speaking of a promising investment opportunity, I saw that same sparkle in his eyes, the one I remembered from his childhood, that silent plea, "Trust me." And I trusted. I signed the papers without question, without suspicion, without safeguarding what had taken me a lifetime to build. Because love, when it's blind, is also mute. It silences instinct. It deafens you to the warnings. For a few days, everything seemed fine. I continued my simple routine, believing I was securing a better future for both of us. But then the strange phone calls from the bank began. The threatening letters that I hesitated to open. The whispered conversations among neighbors that fell silent whenever I walked by. Until one day, the final blow landed. A cold, impersonal notice, printed in harsh black letters: my house would be auctioned off. My home. I tried to reach Daniel. I called. I texted. I knocked on his door. But it was as if he had vanished into thin air. No explanations. No apologies. Not even a shadow of regret. That night, alone in the empty living room, with the curtains ripped down and the furniture shrouded in dust covers, I sat on the cold floor. I clutched the last box of memories, faded photographs, old letters, tiny fragments of a life that now felt meaningless. And I cried. I cried like a lost child. I cried until there were no tears left. Until my chest physically ached from the hollowness inside. I thought that was the end for me. The final collapse. The total ruin. But what I didn't know yet was that rock bottom would also become the cradle of my rebirth. And sometimes, you have to lose everything to finally find yourself. My name is Helen Turner. 58 years old. 58 years of silent battles, postponed dreams, and love given freely to people who didn't always deserve it. I was a single mother, back when being a single mother was still something whispered about in corners. I became an aunt when my sister needed someone to take over the responsibilities she couldn't carry. I was a grandmother at heart to children who weren't mine by blood but found their way into my life, asking for affection with silent eyes. I was a caregiver, an improvised nurse, an unsolicited counselor, a steady foundation for anyone who needed it. For everyone, except myself. While the world spun fast outside, chasing grand ambitions, I stayed behind. I kept the house standing. I picked up the broken pieces that others left scattered. I sacrificed pieces of myself so others could walk lighter. I never complained. I never asked for anything in return. I always believed that love worked like that. Give without expecting. Serve without questioning. I worked for 30 years at a small furniture store. It wasn't a dream job, but it was honest. It was my livelihood, my routine, my fragment of dignity in a world that rarely sees invisible women. Every paycheck, I set a little aside. I saved like someone sowing seeds in barren soil, dreaming that someday I would harvest a peaceful old age. A home where I could grow old surrounded by flowers I had planted myself. The house I lost. It wasn't just bricks and a roof. It was the physical proof of a lifetime of hard work. Every wall painted by my own hands. Every piece of furniture chosen with sacrifice and hope. Every memory stitched into the hallways, the photographs on the walls, the footsteps echoing across bare wooden floors. And then, in a single blink, it was all ripped away. But the cruelest part wasn't losing the house. The cruelest part was the silence that followed. The silence of the very people who once swore they'd always be there. The ones who once promised, family above all. They disappeared like smoke in a gust of wind. No phone calls. No messages. No visits. Not even a, "How are you?" It was as if, without my house, without my belongings, without the ability to help them, I simply stopped existing. And if I was no longer useful, then I was nothing. For weeks, my car became my shelter. I slept curled up in the back seat, wrapped in a thin blanket that barely kept out the biting night cold. I washed my face and brushed my teeth in public restrooms, avoiding the curious stares of strangers, clinging to the last shreds of my dignity. I lived on cheap bread, bitter coffee, and scraps of hope that stubbornly refused to die. Every morning, when I caught a glimpse of myself in the rearview mirror, I barely recognized the woman staring back. Deep dark circles. Wrinkles that seemed to have doubled overnight. But beyond the marks of time were the deeper marks of betrayal and disappointment. It was hard to accept. Hard to understand how someone I loved like a son could betray my trust so coldly. Harder still to believe that all the love I had poured into so many hearts could be discarded so easily. There were nights I thought about giving up. Mornings when simply existing felt like too much to bear. But somewhere deep within that deafening silence, a tiny, stubborn spark began to flicker inside me. Faint at first. Barely noticeable. But real. I didn't know how. I didn't know when. I didn't know where. But I knew one thing. I would get back up. I would rebuild what had been stolen from me. Not to prove anything to them, but to prove to myself that there was still life burning inside me. I would not be buried alive. Not without a fight. I woke up that morning to the harsh sound of someone knocking on the car window. For a split second, I wished it was just a bad dream, but reality settled in, cold and merciless. It was the parking lot guard. A middle-aged man with tired eyes and a firm but compassionate voice. "It's against the rules, ma'am," he said in a low, apologetic tone, like someone who understood my pain, but still had to do his job. I nodded silently. No drama. No protest. I thanked him under my breath, gathered my few belongings, a worn-out purse, a thin blanket, an old notebook filled with scattered thoughts, and started the engine. As I drove aimlessly through the city streets, I watched life unfold through the dirty windshield. Couples laughing in cafes. Vendors setting up stalls at the farmer's market. Children walking to school, their backpacks almost bigger than their tiny bodies. And me, just passing by. No destination. No place to belong. That's when something inside me broke. It wasn't a loud crack. It was silent. Like a hairline fracture that finally splits wide open after years of pressure. A question hammered itself into my mind. How much longer? How much longer would I allow myself to be pushed to the sidelines of life? How much longer would I let pain define me? Without thinking, I pulled over in front of a park. The morning air was still cold, biting into my skin like tiny needles, but I didn't care. I stepped out of the car, walked to a rusted bench, and sat down. And I just stayed there, motionless, while the world continued spinning around me. Families strolling with happy dogs. Teenagers in bright clothes running past with music blasting through their headphones. Mothers pushing strollers down leaf-strewn paths. I felt like a ghost. An outsider, watching life happen behind a thick, impenetrable glass. Like I had been forgotten. Like I no longer existed. And then I saw her. A woman sitting on the ground atop a worn blue tarp, selling small hand-painted canvases. The colors of the paintings burst against the gray, overcast sky. They weren't perfect. They weren't polished. But they had something priceless, soul. People would stop. Admire. Smile. Some would even buy, dropping coins and words of kindness into her world. And in that raw, simple scene, a brutal truth struck me. While I sat there mourning all I had lost, the world kept turning. Nobody paused. Nobody wept with me. Nobody was coming to save me. If I wanted a different life, I would have to save myself. Sitting there on that cold park bench, with the smell of damp grass and the taste of tears I hadn't even realized were falling, I made a silent vow to myself. I would rise. No matter how small the first step had to be. No matter how many times I stumbled. No matter how many doors slammed in my face. This would be the last time I allowed myself to be left behind. I stood up. Adjusted my worn purse on my shoulder. Took a deep breath. And started walking. I didn't know where I was going. But for the first time in a very long time, I felt like I was heading in the right direction. I needed a plan. Something real. Something practical. Something that didn't rely on the kindness of others. Something that depended only on me. Pride, that old companion, screamed inside my head. It wanted me to fight back, to sue Daniel, to demand explanations, to claw back every last penny. But deep down, I knew the truth. He had already spent everything. There was nothing left to retrieve, no money, no dignity. It was time to stop looking back. Time to start building something new, even if it meant starting from nothing. I spent the entire day walking around the city. Knocking on doors. Searching for any opportunity that might keep me afloat. But every interview played out the same way. Pitying looks. Awkward smiles. Polite, rehearsed excuses. You're over 50. We're looking for someone with more energy. Maybe we'll keep your resume on file. The age that I carried like a badge of honor, full of stories and wisdom, now weighed on me like an invisible anchor, dragging me down. By the time the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and red, my legs ached from walking. My stomach rumbled loudly, a painful reminder that even basic needs couldn't be ignored forever. That's when I turned a quiet corner and spotted it. A modest cafe tucked between two shops. The smell of freshly baked bread and brewing coffee seeped out from the cracks around the door, warm and inviting, like a hug I hadn't felt in a long time. There, taped to the inside of the glass door in colorful marker, was a small handwritten sign. Help wanted, kitchen assistant, part-time. Without thinking twice, I pushed the door open. Behind the counter stood a woman with gray hair and the kind of smile that could see straight through you. Kind. Tired. But strong. "Can I help you?" she asked. I saw the sign. I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "I'm looking for work." She studied me for a moment. Not with suspicion, but with genuine curiosity. "Have you worked in a kitchen before?" "Not officially," I replied, doing my best to sound confident. "But I've cooked my whole life. For my kids, for my nieces and nephews, for church events." She chuckled softly. "Sometimes that's more experience than any fancy chef has." And to my surprise, without asking for diplomas, without requesting references, she offered me a chance. "Come in tomorrow at 6, she said. "We'll see how it goes." I left the cafe with my heart pounding in my chest. It wasn't much. It wasn't glamorous. It was uncertain. But it was mine. My first step. That night, parked on a quiet side street, I hugged my old bag like it was the most precious thing in the world. The back seat was still hard. The cold still crept in through the cracked windows. But inside my chest, there was a spark. Faint. But alive. For the first time in months, I fell asleep with something I hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. I knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. I knew the first obstacles were just around the corner. And even so, I was ready to fight. The cafe became my new world. It was small, filled with mismatched chairs, scratched wooden tables, and chipped coffee cups that seemed to hold 1,000 untold stories. But it had a soul. A pulse. An energy I hadn't felt in what felt like forever. It wasn't just the smell of freshly baked bread wafting through the air, or the rich scent of coffee brewing in the corner. It was the sound of laughter. The low murmur of whispered dreams and shared burdens. The steady clinking of dishes, a background rhythm to a life that kept moving forward. There, between batches of bread and trays of pastries, I rediscovered something that life's harshness had buried deep beneath layers of disappointment and sorrow. The joy of creating. In the beginning, it was painful. My knees protested every crouch. My back ached with every tray I pulled from the heavy ovens. My mind, long used to silence and invisibility, trembled each time a customer asked for something new, something I wasn't sure I had the courage, or the talent, to make. But there was magic in working with my hands. Something healing. Each loaf of bread I kneaded, each cake I whipped into existence, felt like stitching pieces of myself back together. Margaret, the cafe's owner, became more than a boss. She became a mentor. A friend. An anchor in the stormy seas of my new beginning. She saw something in me, something I had forgotten was even there. One morning, as we prepared pies for a local event, she said, "Helen, you have a gift. A real gift. You don't even realize it, but your pastries, they have soul." I was speechless. For so long, I had simply functioned. I survived. I did what needed to be done, quietly, without thinking I had anything special to offer the world. But with Margaret's encouragement, I started to take risks. I pulled out old recipes, memories from childhood Sunday dinners, church bake sales, and quiet kitchen moments after long days. I played with flavors. Invented combinations. Each batch was a silent rebellion against the fears that still tried to cling to me. And people started noticing. "Who made this cake?" they'd ask, their eyes lighting up. "This pumpkin bread tastes just like my grandmother's," they'd say, almost tearfully. Slowly but surely, my pastries gained a reputation. The lines outside the cafe grew longer every Saturday morning. The smell of coffee and fresh cakes drifted down the street like an open invitation to anyone passing by. Margaret, ever practical, came to me one day with a proposal that changed everything. "You bake. I manage. We'll split the profits. It was a leap of faith. And for the first time in what felt like a lifetime, I decided to jump. Over time, that little cafe stopped being just a workplace. It became a temple. A sanctuary. A testament to two women who refused to stay invisible. But, of course, not every day was easy. There were still days when fear came knocking. Days when familiar faces from my past walked into the cafe, whispering to each other as if I had somehow fallen from grace. Days when money was still tight, and the bills still seemed to come faster than the profits. And then there was that voice, cruel and persistent, that whispered in the darkest corners of my mind. You're too old. This won't last. You were never meant to win. But every time a child beamed after biting into one of my chocolate cakes. Every time an elderly customer held a loaf of my homemade bread and said, "This reminds me of my youth." Every genuine smile. Every heartfelt, "Thank you." It hammered another nail into the coffin of that voice of doubt. I wasn't the broken woman crying in parking lots anymore. I was Helen Turner. A creator of flavors. A weaver of second chances. And for the first time in a long, long time, I was truly alive. It was a busy afternoon at the cafe. The sweet scent of fresh bread mingled with the strong aroma of freshly brewed coffee. The air buzzed with the sound of laughter, clinking plates, and animated conversations, the kind of vibrant hum that had come to feel like home. I was behind the counter, dusting a fresh batch of cinnamon muffins with powdered sugar, when I heard the bell above the door chime. I looked up instinctively. And for a moment, the world seemed to slow down. Standing in the doorway were two figures from a life I thought I had left behind. Daniel. And my sister. Daniel looked like a shadow of the boy I once raised. Thinner. Dark circles under his eyes. Clothes worn and loose. His shoulders slumped forward, his gaze fixed on the ground, heavy with shame and desperation. And my sister. The woman who once swore that family was everything now seemed smaller somehow. Her smile was forced. Her eyes dull, as if the light had long since left them. For a brief moment, my heart, bruised but not broken, wavered. The instinct to forgive, to comfort, still flickered somewhere deep inside me. It was an old reflex, a wound that even time had struggled to fully heal. But then, I truly saw them. Saw them for who they were. The people who had chosen to look away when I needed them the most. The ones who had taken the easy road, even when it meant stepping over my dignity to get there. Daniel approached the counter, hesitant, his sweaty hands wringing together nervously. "Aunt Helen," he said, his voice shaking, trying, and failing, to sound sincere. We need to talk." There was something rehearsed in his tone. Something that wasn't true remorse, but rather, need. My sister moved closer, trying to muster a broken smile. "We're going through a hard time," she said, choosing her words carefully, as if fishing for the Helen they used to know, the one who would have rushed to help without a second thought. "We thought maybe you could help us." Help. The word hung in the air like a bitter fog. For the first time in years, it wasn't me who bowed her head. It wasn't me who shrank, apologizing simply for existing. I stood tall. Wiped my hands calmly on my apron. And smiled, a serene, unwavering smile. "Interesting," I said, my voice steady as steel. "When I needed help, you both disappeared. But now that I've built something for myself, now you remember I exist." Daniel opened his mouth to stammer an excuse, some hollow justification, some well-practiced lie. But I raised a hand and stopped him cold. "I learned a very expensive lesson, Daniel," I continued, my voice clear and free of bitterness. "A lesson paid for with tears, cold nights, and the loss of almost everything I held dear." They stared at me, speechless, as I took a slow, steady breath. The family that left me behind is not the family I choose to have by my side now that I've been reborn. Every word was sharp. Precise. But instead of cutting them, it freed me. I hope you find your way, I said, softly but firmly. But it won't be at my expense. I turned away, not needing to see their faces to know the truth. That rejection, the rejection they now tasted, was a bitter mirror of the one they had once served me. I heard their hesitant steps retreating toward the door. I heard the chime of the bell as it swung gently behind them. I heard the hollow silence they left in their wake. But most importantly, I felt something new. Freedom. There, surrounded by the comforting sense of fresh coffee and dreams rising like bread in an oven, I finally understood. I didn't need to prove anything to anyone. I wasn't the abandoned woman anymore. I was Helen Turner. And I was my own salvation. Months passed since that day. The cafe didn't just survive, it blossomed. It became more than just a small neighborhood business, it became a refuge. A gathering place for tired souls, anonymous dreamers, and families looking for more than food, a place where they could find warmth. We transformed the back room into a makeshift industrial kitchen, where new dreams rose each morning along with the scent of fresh bread. Orders poured in from all over the city, wedding cakes, birthday pies, breakfast baskets for community events. And every Saturday, we opened our doors for local artisan fairs, offering space to new talents, often women my age, women like me, who had been overlooked and forgotten for far too long. It was my silent way of giving back, a tribute to the woman I once saw in the park, the woman who, without even knowing it, had inspired me to rise. I was no longer just Helen Turner, the woman who had lost everything. I was Helen Turner, entrepreneur. Creator of flavors. Weaver of new beginnings. Master of my own destiny. With the profits, hard-earned, harder than most people could ever understand, I bought a small house on the outskirts of town. A modest plot of land. Nothing extravagant. But it had a spacious backyard, and I planted it myself. Lilies. Daisies. Hydrangeas, the same flowers that had once witnessed my tears at the home I had lost. It wasn't a mansion. It wasn't grand. But it was mine. Every flower blooming, every chair carefully placed on the porch, was a testament to survival. A visible proof that even the deepest scars could blossom into something beautiful. In the late afternoons, I would sit on that porch with a warm cup of tea in my weathered hands, and watch the sun paint the sky in hues of gold and purple. The breeze would kiss my face. The birds would dance above me. And a genuine, effortless smile would find its way to my lips. There was no luxury. There was no excess. But there was something that no amount of money could ever buy. Peace. Freedom. Belonging. It was there, in that sacred silence, that I finally understood what life had been trying to teach me all along. Sometimes, you have to be stripped of everything, pride, security, illusions, so you can rebuild yourself with what truly matters. Self-trust. The courage to start again. The freedom to be exactly who you are, without apology, without fitting into anyone else's mold. I could have let myself drown in resentment. Could have been consumed by anger. Could have let bitterness rot away whatever future was still left for me. But instead, I chose the harder road, the road of rebuilding. The road of self-love. And looking back now, at all the nights I cried myself to sleep in the back seat of that car, at all the doors slammed in my face, at all the judgmental stares I endured, I smile. Because, paradoxically, losing everything turned out to be the greatest gift life could have given me. I found myself. And now I know. It's never too late to start over. Life doesn't truly begin until you decide to live it for yourself. And me? I finally decided. If this story touched your heart, Don't forget to like the video and share it with someone who might need a little hope today. Subscribe to the channel for more powerful stories of resilience, rebirth, and transformation. And tell me in the comments, which part of Helen's journey resonated the most with you? Click on the screen now to watch more inspiring stories that will warm your heart.